Hello and welcome to the Second Tier Podcast. I'm Ryan Dilks and I'm joined by the Swansea to my Brentford. It's Justin Peach.
Good day to you, Ryan.
Justin, how the devil are you?
I'm very good. I presume I feel a lot better than Swansea fans this morning. I assume I definitely feel a lot better than Brentford fans feel this morning.
Yeah, I've seen a few Brentford fans on our Twitter.
Yeah.
It seems like West London was quite the place to be last night with Chelsea also winning the Champions League. But I also imagine they are still very happy at the outcome of yesterday. You are, of course, listening to the biggest championship-specific podcast, the Second Tier. Thank you for joining us wherever you are. Ladies and gentlemen, Brentford, our Premier League. How weird does that sound? They'll be playing in the top tier of English football for the first time since 1947 after they beat Swansea 2-0. An Ivan Toney penalty and Emiliano Marcondes goal sent Thomas Frank's boys on their way. And if you want a brief summary of the game, Justin, Brentford were fairly comfortable throughout.
Yeah, they were. They were very, very comfortable. It wasn't... well, if we're talking just statistically, David Raya had 0 saves to make. Swansea didn't have any shots on target. I think there was just one moment where Conor Hurricane put in a corner right on top of David Raya, and he had to punch it clear, and that was it really. And that's not really an indictment on Swansea. I thought Brentford controlled the game from start to finish. They managed the occasion a lot better than Swansea did, and they were deserved winners by an absolute country mile, to be honest.
Yeah, they were. They really, really were. And we'll talk about where it went wrong for Swansea shortly. But let's go through the big moments in the game. The Bees got off to a great start when they were given a penalty 10 minutes in after Brian Mbeumo was brought down by Freddie Woodman. No complaints about the penalty, are there? Ivan Toney slotted it home. And in the grand scheme of things, we talk about Brentford's mentality on the big occasions. And I think getting that goal early on was probably the best thing that could have happened for them.
Yeah, well, we thought Swansea started quite well in the first 5-10 minutes. They and then Sergei Canos picks up the ball on the left hand side, cuts inside, and plays a ridiculously incisive pass. A very, very good pass. One of the best assists this season, I think. Well, it didn't actually end up in a direct assist, but
yeah, I know what you mean.
He was heavily involved in the penalty, and then obviously Ivan Toney having the coolness to step up at this level in the game. I was convinced he was going to miss it. I don't know why. I think just because of the occasion. Even I was getting overawed with it. But as soon as he stuck that away, I think not only did you hear celebrations, but you hear everyone just sort of just fall back on the sofa and go, right, let's go. We can relax.
You said Swansea played well. I thought prior to that goal, the game was quite nervy in the first few minutes, and it only seemed to calm down once Brentford got that goal, and then they were just playing with freedom and confidence from that point on, weren't they? 10 minutes later, Brentford have a counter-attack, lightning quick. Rasmussen plays it over to Marcondes, and he fires it home, and it seemed like that was a real, haymaker from a Brentford perspective to Swansea, Justin.
It was such a good counter-attack, and it came from a Swansea attack. I think when I'm saying Swansea started the game well, I thought they were getting into the final third a lot easier than Swansea did. But the first goal changed the tide, and then the second goal just took the wind completely out of the sails of Swansea. And from it's the quality that Brentford possess. I think winning the ball back. I think it was Jensen or Roslev that tackled at AU. I can't quite remember. But winning the ball back in their own penalty area and then breaking away so quickly. Brian Mbeumo's hold-up play was tremendous, really, waiting for support. And then Roslev, I thought Roslev cocked up a little bit when... Yeah, I'm the type of guy who says, just take it on your left foot. Just get it in, take a shot on your left foot. But he came back inside on his right and found Emiliano Marcondes, and it was very good. Relaxed play again by Brentford. I don't think that would have happened in last season's playoff final. I think that was a complete mentality shift for Brentford yesterday. Sorry.
Yeah, and as I say, that was very much a haymaker from a Brentford perspective to a Swansea perspective. And if we're sticking with the boxing-related themes, then Swansea did seem rattled, and that led to them making clumsy mistakes. And in the final few minutes of the first half, they were lucky to not be even further behind, because there was one chance in particular when Gurhi's tried to flick it backwards in a very uncharacteristic mistake from him.
Mm-hmm.
And then Boomer nearly got on the end of it, but was eventually tackled. Swansea looked all over the place, really. And if they were a boxer, they'd have been stumbling around out on their feet a bit. In the second half, a much needed break from a Swansea perspective for Steve Cooper to get them in and try and settle his team down. And they actually started well, didn't they? Andre Ayew having an unbelievable opportunity in the first couple of minutes of the second half. Ball's played across and he heads it wide from a few yards out. Glenn Murray on Sky was saying he thought it was the best chance of the match. But I thought it was quite a tricky one, because if the ball's come flying across, hasn't it? And he's in between two men. He's stretching for it anyway. So for him to get it on target would have been quite difficult. But I don't think anything that can be debated is this, that if Ayew had scored that, then it could have been a very different result.
When we talk about nerves with Brentford, if Ayew puts that away, I think it's very easy for me to say in hindsight, but it's a completely different second half from a Swansea perspective. I think they can claw the game back if he puts that away. If Andre Ayew's 6 inches taller, like I thought he was, because obviously we had a right old debate about Andre Ayew's height. I thought he was 6'1".
Yeah, right. Hang on. We need to pull this up, actually. Let's take a quick break from the playoffs. So me and Justin were obviously watching the game yesterday, and we were talking about Ayew's height for some reason. And for some reason, you thought he was 6'1".
Honestly, I was convinced he was 6'1", and then we fact checked, and I had to sit down. Couldn't take the news.
For anyone who's not aware, he's actually 5'7", which is quite a height difference. I mean, that's nearly half a foot.
Yeah, a lot.
I don't. Why did you think he was 6'1"? Because that is ridiculously tall in comparison.
I think the first thought is Ethan Pinnock and Pontus Jansson are both 6'3". Given my gauge of height, they might be smaller or taller. But he had to beat them in the air for a fair few opportunities. So forgive me for thinking Ayew was taller than he actually is. It is a compliment to Ayew, I would add.
Have you just never watched him like when he's on the ground? Have you only ever seen Andre Ayew when he's going up for headers?
Yeah. Surprisingly enough, I've never stood next to him, so it's impossible for me to judge wholly. But if he was taller, he puts that away. Is going back to the original point.
Absolutely right, but that's no excuse for you being terrible at telling people's heights. Anyway, let's get back onto the game. The next big moment was Jay Fulton sending off on 66 minutes for Swansea after a tackle on Matthias Jensen. Now, I think everyone had exactly the same reaction when we saw it initially. Everyone was just thinking, what a stupid challenge to make at that time. Coming from behind, we were watching the game together, weren't we? I said, that is a disgusting challenge. Jay Fulton should be absolutely ashamed of himself for doing that. But then the replay showed that actually he didn't really do too much wrong. He has stood on Matthias Jensen's foot, and then that's led to him, losing his footing and kind of two-footing him. But whatever the case, it meant this game was only going one way, really, didn't it, Justin?
Yeah, it did. It was a really unfortunate red card in how it happened, but I think a red card is the fair outcome because it was a dangerous challenge, albeit whether or not it was accidental. But when it was a one-sided game before, I think any opportunity for Swansea getting into the game left at the moment that Jay Fulton got sent off in the 65th minute. There was a glimmer of hope at that point, I think. Very, very slim, because obviously they've gone 20 minutes into the second half without really getting into Brentford. I think the only opportunities they were creating were from long throws from Connor Roberts. So yeah, any chance of getting back into the game at that point left as soon as Jay Fulton was sent off.
Yeah, their chances by that point had seriously deteriorated in it anyway, but then that pretty much wiped it out, and they didn't really have much of a sniff at goal from that point anyway. Not that they had much of a sniff at goal in the whole match as a whole. So there we go. Brentford were promoted after not much else happened in the second half. What did you think, looking at the game as a whole, Justin? What did you think Brentford did right?
I'm going to make one of these stupid comments that you hate me making, but they won the game. That's one of the right things they did. I think they played the occasion a lot better than Swansea did. You could tell, especially sort of sub 10 minutes after Brentford won the penalty, they were just playing with so much freedom and so much joy on the pitch, which sounds a bit cheesy, but what I'm trying to say is it felt like a weight was just lifted from Brentford. I think Thomas Frank, looking at the footage pre-game, he looked incredibly relaxed, which Thomas Frank is an intense, serious guy. Never looks relaxed, but he actually looked quite relaxed during before the game, which, you know, if that tells me anything, that he's got then he's got the players relaxed before the game. But yeah, I think overall, I think they just played the occasion a lot better than Swansea did going into it, and as well as that, they've got experience of this, whereas a few of the Swansea players don't. Quite young, aren't they?
Yeah, I was going to say that I think, and this is one of those cliches that quite often I don't think really matter too much in football, but you hear analysts and pundits saying it all the time anyway. But on this occasion, I think Brentford genuinely did learn from last season. We've been hearing from Billy from Besotted. He's been saying that hopefully they'll have learned from this year, and it looked like they did. Thomas Frank, as you say, was a lot calmer than he usually is, and maybe he thought that if he can, you know, be that calm character in the dressing room, then he would go out there and reflect on the players. And they did look a lot calmer than they have done it many times this season. I think from a tactical standpoint, the most important thing they did was keep a tight leash on Andre Ayew.
Yeah.
One thing we've said throughout the season is if you keep him quiet, then you go a long way to keeping Swansea quiet. And that's unfortunately, from a Swansea perspective, proven to be the case. Brentford were just brilliant defensively. They kept Jamal Lowe very quiet as well. I barely remember him touching the ball, really. And they were so dangerous on the break. Every time Swansea did come at them, and Brentford managed to get the ball back, it was straight up the other end. I thought Sergi Canos was great. The same with Emiliano Marcondes. The whole back line was class, as I've just said. They were so comfortable. And that's not something you say really too often in a playoff final.
Quite right. Quite right. They're normally very, very cagey games. No team is a clear winner. But Brentford were. And going back to the element of calmness, we didn't see any implosion from Pontus Jansson. So I think that tells
and that's
you
the biggest achievement of all.
Yeah, exactly. That tells you how calm Brentford were throughout the game and how switched on they were, because at times their game management has been relatively poor. Going to the Bournemouth game in the semi-final, Pontus Jansson at right wing back loses the ball, Vitaly Janelt dives in, and Bournemouth score on the counter-attack. They've learned from their mistakes. Which again alludes to the point that you made. So yeah, Brentford clear winners here, and it's frustrating from a Swansea perspective because I expected so much more from them.
Yeah, we'll go on to Swansea in just a sec, because you've raised a good point there. Looking back on this final compared to other finals, would you say this is one of the most one-sided playoff finals we've ever seen?
Yeah, I think so. I think I go back to the Norwich Borough game where Norwich put 2 in early against Borough, and that was a comfortable game for them. But other than that, the games are very, very close. There's no separating the teams. I know Fulham won 2-0 last year, but it was 0-0 until the 118th minute. So yeah, they're very cagey games, and Brentford clear winners. One of the most one-sided finals we've seen, I think.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. The Norwich game, as you said, Derby QPR was very one-sided, even though the scoreline didn't exactly go the same way. Yeah, I think it was probably the most one-sided playoff finals we've ever seen. It's from the first 20 minutes. Brentford, of course, they were 2-0 by that point, but it looked like Brentford had one foot in the Premier League. And it was always going to be a big ask for Swansea to get anything back from it. So, yeah, I'd probably say it was one of the most one-sided playoff finals that we've ever seen. So that brings me very nicely onto Swansea. What went wrong for them? I suppose quite a lot, really. But from Steve Cooper's perspective, I thought starting off with 3-5-2 was an odd decision.
Quite right. We were banking on them going 4 at the back. At no point did I consider that they'd go 3 at the back. The debate in the playoff semi-finals was, were they going to go 3 at the back or were they going to go 4 at the back? And I think on this occasion he's overthought it. He's tried. I feel like he's tried to match Brentford up, because obviously Brentford have gone in with the 3 at the back as well, and they looked incredibly good against Bournemouth with that 3 at the back. So I think Steve Cooper on this occasion has overthought it and got it completely wrong, considering how well they manage Barnsley, who play a similar counter-pressing, counter-style to Brentford do in how they work off the ball. I'd have thought a 4 at the back would have been the right thing to do, because that 4 at the back managed that style off the ball a lot better against Barnsley. So to switch for a big game like this, again, probably goes down as one of the bigger mistakes in playoff finals. The other one I can think of is obviously Frank Lampard not starting a striker for Derby in the playoff final against Villa. Just bizarre. And I think as well as that, just failing to get players into the game. I think Matt Grimes had the most touches on the pitch, whereas Jamal Lowe only had 25 touches, which is one of the lowest other than the subs. Getting Jamal Lowe in the game gets you joy in the final third. It gets you a player running at the back four. If you don't get him in the game, then what chance have you got of getting the ball into the box?
And in fact, you're still not over Lampard. Yeah, you couldn't resist bringing that one up, could you?
Very bitter.
Still bitter about it. Yeah, considering Swansea in the 2 playoff semi-finals were playing 4-3-3, and then over the past couple of months, when they've gone to 4-3-3, that's when they've won games. They've really struggled with 3-5-2 recently. It looks like teams have figured out how to play against 3-5-2. It was very odd for them to go back to the 3-5-2. And I mean, it didn't last long, did it? I think they were playing 3-5-2 up until they were 2-0 down, and then went to 4-3-3. But by that point, it's a bit too late, wasn't it? Swansea played like the sides that we've seen in the second half of the season, not the one we saw in the playoff semis or the first half of the season. They didn't have many ideas going forward, and were clumsy at the back. It's not the Swansea side that we've seen for the majority of the season. And that's disappointing, really, because you want to see, the 2 best sides possible go at it in the playoff final, but it just wasn't the case. And that's ultimately why Swansea are going to be in the Championship next season. Welcome back to the Second Tier podcast. So, Justin, here is the big question, the $1 million question. How will Brentford do in the Premier League? First of all, do you fancy them to stay up next season?
I think I do. It's so difficult to predict how these things turn out, because Norwich a couple of years ago, given how they went up under Daniel Farke in the first season they won the Championship, you'd expected them to turn up and rattle a few teams. I think they beat City, but after a bit, it just tailed off, and Sheffield United actually ended up doing better than them. So it is difficult to say, but I think if they get recruitment right, I feel like they've got places positions in their team that need improving. They'll need better quality players as backups as well. For example, is Mads Roerslev going to be the first team right back next season in the Premier League? Maybe there might be faith in him to do the job, but having players who can chip in everywhere, who've got Premier League experience, I think is going to be important for Brentford, and they might have to deviate a little bit from the transfer strategy that they put in. But then again, I think Leicester, when they first went up under Nigel Pearson, other than signing Esteban Cambiasso, there weren't too many additions with a great level of Premier League experience. I think there's Mark Albrighton as well, maybe a couple of more, but there wasn't too many, and they did fine, didn't they? They did all right. So I think Brentford
eventually,
and obviously won the Premier League. Just that. So I don't think there's too much that they need to do, but I think getting Premier League experience goes without saying into that team.
I tell you what, Justin, I genuinely do think Brentford can be a side which breaks into Europe. I'm not saying it will happen next season. I think they'll take a couple of seasons to adjust to the Premier League and really settle themselves. But it's 100% a club which is capable of continuing to progress, because obviously they've progressed a lot over the past few years. I don't see any reason why that cannot continue. We all know how good they are at recruiting players. Imagine what they can do now with the added pull of the Premier League and $1 million pounds more in the back pocket. It's exciting to think about, and that's why I genuinely do think in the long term they could be amongst the sides that are challenging for the top 6. They've got to make sure they stay up next season first and foremost, but I'm more confident in them doing that than Watford and Norwich, if I'm being honest.
Mm-hmm.
I think they've already got a squad which can stay up, but if they recruit well, as they always do, that will only improve their chances.
I'm trying to think of relevant examples for Brentford, but I do think they're one of the first because they're not a big club, especially in West London. I know QPR have had Premier League experience. There's Fulham as well, who have been in the Premier League, and obviously Chelsea, who aren't the biggest of teams, or only won the Champions League yesterday. So in terms of club size, they're not very big, and obviously they haven't been in the top division since 1946. I think we saw a stat yesterday on Sky. 1947, which is a fair amount of time ago. It wasn't yesterday, was it? So they are one of the first for me, because, as I say, there's that small club mentality that they have throughout, because they're a community club, and I don't mean it as any disrespect to Brentford. They, compared to the size of the club,
what's the point you're trying to make here? Get to the point.
What I'm trying to say is exactly that. They are one of the first of their sort of mold to go up. The transfer strategy, the way they run, the coaching setup, because they got B teams. They don't have an academy. They employ B teams and age groups going below. And for me, having that going into the Premier League is what, not only is it refreshing, but as well as that, that's probably why they will compete with the likes of Burnley, because they do it the traditional way, whereas Brentford have come in with this new strategy that has completely swept the board that teams are starting to copy. So they are one of the first of their kind in that environment. Trying to articulate a point, but that's what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, you've taken a very long way round to get to that point, but I do get what you mean. I get they are a very unique side, aren't they, in terms of what they're bringing to the Premier League, in terms of the money ball system.
Yeah.
I suppose the only club that you can really compare them to in terms of size would be someone like Bournemouth, I guess, in terms of size. And then in terms of the recruiting side of things, I'm guessing Brighton are kind of a similar kind of mold, aren't they? So you kind of mixing those two clubs together. But I do think Brentford have got a lot about them. They're a side that have been made for the Premier League for quite some time. They've got the stadium, they've got the recruitment. It's all about actually having the pull of the Premier League and the extra, money lying in the bank accounts. So now that they've actually got that, I think it can lead to great things. But speaking of chances of how they'll do in the Premier League, their chances of holding on to star players, especially Ivan Toney, have greatly increased now, haven't they? Do you think he'll stay?
Yeah, I think they will. I think given how he was reacting in the post-match presser, there's no way of him leaving. I think, as well as that, him having more time at a club like Brentford, who are there to improve players and sell them on. I think that's going to stand him in good stead rather than jumping ship at the first opportunity. I don't think there'll be many clubs that will be willing to fork out the money that Brentford will want for him. We look at Saeed Benrahma a couple of seasons ago. I can't remember when it was now, but he was linked after. It was his first full season when he was linked with big clubs coming in for him. They didn't sell because they were asking too much money. I think Brentford had the same mentality with the likes of Ivan Toney. But as well as that, I think Sergei Canos has proved that he's also a big player for Brentford, as well as Brian Mbeumo and Vitaliano. I think he's been capped at under 21 level for Germany. So if he has a good season in the Premier League, I won't be surprised to see him on the radar of Hansi Flick, the new Germany manager, as well. So there are a lot of players here who've got so much potential, so much potential. So no doubt there'll be clubs sniffing around, but I don't think Brentford are under any pressure to sell.
Well, that's it, isn't it? You quite rightly said before that their system was to bring in these young players, mould them, and then sell them for a greater price. Now, they don't have to do that because they've got, obviously, the TV money from the Premier League. And when a club comes knocking for Ivan Toney, which I think they still will do, I think clubs will be asking, well, how much do you want for him? They're more than entitled to put a big old price tag on him. because now they know they don't have to sell if they don't want to. So they can hold on to your star players like Tony. And if a massive, massive bid comes in and they think, actually, we've got someone else lined up and we can bring him in for a cheaper price, then may as well. So it's only a win-win for Brentford, really, in this situation. I will say this: I'm going to miss talking about Brentford in the Championship, just in how infuriatingly wasteful they are when it comes to XG. They do deserve to go up, don't they? Of course, they finished third with one of the best points tallies a third-place side has ever had. So I don't think anyone could particularly begrudge them actually going up. I think the thing is as well, even if they didn't go up, they'd have been challenging for automatic promotion again next season, wouldn't they? The other three playoff teams, I'm not sure we could have necessarily said that about, but Brentford, because they're so well run, they would have definitely been challenging to go up again in a year's time. So I'm kind of glad that they have gone up, because that means it's just over and done with.
Yeah, but when you say the likes of Barnsley, Bournemouth, I mean, Bournemouth have got a mini rebuild on their hands. Swansea are going to have a mini rebuild on their hands. Barnsley have got the potential to creep up, but can they replace their best players if they lose Alex Mills out of contract? Whereas Brentford, you're always confident that Ollie Watkins left, brought in Ivan Toney, Said Benrahma left, Sergi Canos stepped up, and Brian Mbeumo stepped up in the latter half of the season. So you're always confident that Brentford are going to find a solution to a problem very, very quickly, whereas other teams don't have that. I think Barnsley are just setting out that journey now. So perhaps they're a team who will start to fill that category very soon, hopefully. But yeah, you're absolutely right that they're a team that are on the up. Even if they didn't go up this season, they'd have been challenging next season. Even if Thomas Frank had left again, I'd have been confident that the right man would have been put in place to take the team forward. So they've always got a plan B. They've always got a plan C. They've always got a plan D. Doesn't matter how badly they have to deviate. There's always a plan for Brentford, which makes them one of the best run clubs in the country.
Yeah, absolutely. They know how to recruit, don't they? We keep going back to this point, but their recruitment is so impressive. How many strikers have they gone through over the past few years now? Andre Gray, Neil Maupay, Ollie Watkins, Ivan Toney. They've got this proven track record of selling these players and then bringing in someone arguably better.
Well, a really important point to make is, and I think I tried to articulate my point a few minutes ago when I went round and round and round. Brentford are a small club. The likes of QPR, Fulham, then these aren't big clubs. But Brentford, because they're so well run, because they recruit really well and sell high, they buy low, sell high, they've been able to compete financially with the likes of, well, in terms of transfer fees, the likes of Watford, Bournemouth, teams that have really thrown money at it. You look at Derby and Sheffield Wednesday, how much money they've thrown at it in the past few years. Brentford have thrown less at it, better off financially for it, got better players. It's just a mould of what you should do as a football club in modern times.
Yeah, it's a template, isn't it, for how Championship clubs should be run, really, or at least similarly run, whereas other clubs who I'll neglect to name have spunked a lot of money on players who have no resale value. Well, Brentford have shown this is the way to do it. Justin, commiserations to Swansea fans, but look on the bright side, you'll still have us next season. So I think that's the greatest prize of all. I think I may have just heard a massive groan come from the South Wales area there. Obviously, massive disappointment for the Swans, Justin. Of course, they have still got a long summer ahead, but what are your early instincts about how Swansea will look like next season?
It could be a very different Swansea. We've seen Steve Cooper linked with, I think, Palace. There might be another club in the running.
West Brom was one who is linked with him.
There's two takers there. I think Palace. They've been waiting. I've heard Andros Townsend say that they're waiting for a manager to come in, and it's close apparently to start offering contracts out to players. So that might be Steve Cooper if we were to speculate. But yeah, they might be without Steve Cooper. Loan players are going to go back to their parent clubs. The likes of Wayne Routledge, Andre Ayew, they're out of contract. So it's going to be a different Swansea team to the one we saw in the playoff final. I don't think that's a bad thing, because I think this is a really good opportunity to throw down some ambition, throw down £3 or £4 million rather than freeze and a couple of 100,000 here and there. Because if you back Steve Cooper, if he is still at the club, if you back Steve Cooper, I think he can take the Swansea team and put into the Premier League. But saying that, they've got to replace the big players that are leaving. Mark Guehi, Conor Hourihane, Andre Ayew. Andre Ayew is a massive, massive player that they're going to lose.
Yeah, and that's really why I worry about Swansea a bit, Justin. It is also worth pointing out this is their last year of parachute payments. So that constant flow of cash, guaranteed cash, isn't necessarily coming in. And from a playing side of things, it does look like it's going to be a summer of upheaval at the Liberty Stadium. Andre Ayew isn't going to stay because his deal is expiring. I don't think Connor Roberts will stay either. I think he'll probably go to the Prem, and I don't think Swansea fans can be too upset about him leaving. And then Mark Guehi and Freddie Woodman are only on loan. And what I've just listed there, Justin, is Swansea's 4 best players this season. Now, for a club to lose their best player is obviously a big blow, but when you lose 4 of them, that is quite something to come back from. And it's not like the replacements are there in the squad ready to step in, are they? This Swansea squad is quite small compared to other Championship clubs, and no doubt they'll have to recruit this summer. I think they'll almost certainly dip into the loan market again. That's a very reliable source of players for Swansea as a club, and they've done very well in that market recently, and I think they'll do exactly that again, bring in some very talented players. It's just a lot of talent that needs replacing, and that leaves me at the final point that I don't think they'll be able to replicate the season that they've just had.
I think that builds into the point that Steve Cooper did a very good job with the team that he's got. I think we were looking at the benches yesterday, and Brentford were able to bring on Godos, whereas Swansea didn't have a striker.
They brought on Liam Cullen, didn't they?
Yeah, and it's no disrespect.
That's no disrespect to Liam Cullen, but he's a young lad who hasn't really done it in the first team, has he?
And he hasn't got big game experience. So not having that strength in depth that teams need in a big game like that to change the game. They needed a player to come on and change the game. Didn't have that. So not only did they not have that now, but they're going to lose their 4 best players, as you said. So they've got to replace those and bring in players who can do something as a squad player, essentially. So yeah, they're in a bit of a sticky situation. But again, Swansea, they have a good recruitment team. They identify good players. I think if Steve Cooper is there, they will be able to bring in young players. I think the free agent market is looking pretty tasty this season. So there might be 1 or 2 they'll dip in there as well. But yeah, it's a big summer ahead for Swansea, and I think I won't be surprised to see him competing up for the top 6 next season. But this season they were competing for the automatics up until sort of 8 games to go before they fell away. Don't think that'll happen next season.
Well, they're not the kind of club who spends, bags of money, are they?
No.
They are very prudent in their spending, and that's going to be the case again. They may very well have to dip into the free agent market to bring in any permanent signings. But as I say, I think the loan market will very much be utilised by Swansea once again. The final question then on the Swans, Justin, is what you were talking about just a second ago, Steve Cooper. Will he stay or will he go? He has been linked with other jobs, namely the Palace job. West Brom is another job he's been linked with, although it looks like Chris Wilder's going to get that job now. Do you think he will stay? And another question after that is, how important is it that he does stay?
I think first point is I think he will go.
Really?
I do. I think he will go. I think Palace. Again, Palace is a big rebuild job, but they're a Premier League team, and as well as that, they're a team that I think they're going to change strategy because it's very well spoken about how old their average age in their squad is. I think coming in and bringing in someone like Steve Cooper, who's been able to deliver under the odds, under pressure as well, with not a huge budget. I think he's been able to get a lot out of the team tactically. I think he's developed players well. You look at Conor Gallagher and Ryan Brewster; they stepped up last season, and Mark Guehi's been just unreal. Connor Roberts has come on in leaps and bounds as well. So there's evidence there that he's improved players that have worked under him. So yeah, I think Palace will come in for him. I think he will end up going to Palace. And I think from a Swansea perspective, I do think it's important that he stays, because as a coach, he's the perfect mould of getting the best out of young players, being tactically spot on, although there was a bit of a tactical faux pas yesterday in the playoff final, the biggest game. And as well as that, he's been able to manage the experienced guys. The Andre Ayew, for example, I read an article that he works very well with Steve Cooper. So he's the perfect mold for Swansea. But then again, Swansea have always been able to replace their head coaches ever since, I think, Roberto Martinez took over. Then it's Paulo Sousa, then Brendan Rodgers, etc., etc. They've always been able to replace their head coaches. So I don't think it is imperative for Swansea or as much of a release for Swansea. I think they can replace Steve Cooper.
Yeah, always replace their coaches with Gary Monk.
Forgot that.
Yeah, they have got a very good track record at bringing in coaches, haven't they? I mean, you talk about Graham Potter and Steve Cooper. They're probably the two highest rated British managers, apart from Brendan Rodgers, in the country right now. So that's a fantastic track record from a Swansea perspective. I don't think Steve Cooper will go. I think the Palace job will probably go to someone like Frank Lampard. And I'm not saying that's the right decision, but that's how I think it will go. And I think Steve Cooper will stay. Whether he stays for the whole of next season is another question. I wonder if a Premier League club, who, when they inevitably sack a manager, whether Steve Cooper will be one of the first names on the shortlist for that job. But I do think he'll stay for the summer. I think it is important that he does stay as well. I know he's not completely well thought of in the Swansea fan base for some reason, but he is one of the best managers in the Championship in terms of the job he's done this season. Mm-hmm. And if Swansea do manage to keep hold of him, then that's only going to be a good thing for them progressing as a club, because it is a project. They may have to take a step back next season, but if they manage to keep hold of Steve Cooper, then it shouldn't be too drastic a step back. Justin, let's move on from the playoff chat and go on to this. Yes, it's time for the news, and we'll start off with this, Justin. Slavisa Jokanovic has been appointed the new Sheffield United boss. He takes over from Paul Heckingbottom, who was interim charge after Chris Wilder left. I tell you what, I think this is a brilliant appointment, Justin.
I think any club that gets Slavisa Jokanovic in is a brilliant appointment. I think the only reservations I have is just style of play, whether or not he can get out of Sheffield United what he got out of Fulham. I think it took a bit of time for him to get it at Fulham. Obviously, he was there for half a season before they... it was probably a full year before Fulham really got going with him, because they were...
He was there for half a season, then they got into the playoffs the season afterwards, and then they won the playoffs the season after that.
Yeah, but when it was a half season when they got into the playoffs, the first half of the season, they were really, really poor. And then it went on this ridiculous run that got them into 6th, I think, or even higher.
Yeah.
And that's when they started to really kick on after that point. So it was probably like a full year before they really got going. So it's whether or not the only reservation for me is how long it takes him to get that style of play into this Sheffield United team, because they've gone from a Chris Wilder, which is not defensive, but it's disciplined, it's hardworking, it's organised. How can he progress that? How can he get that foundation level that Chris Wilder instilled and put his spin on it? I think he's a good enough coach to do it, and by God, has he got a good squad to work with at Championship level. So it could be frightening, but as well as that, I think it could also not be. I think it could underwell.
I don't think the squad's that good at Championship level.
At Championship level,
compared to the likes of West Brom, I think West Brom's squad is much better than Sheffield United's.
I don't know. I really rate this Sheffield United squad at Championship level. I mean, Ryan Brewster and Ollie McBurney, for example, in the Championship, we know they've both scored a lot of goals. Both for Swansea, actually. So
yeah, that's fair. I think it's a very good Championship squad, but I think West Brom's squad, for example, is a decent Premier League squad. It's just not necessarily had the right man in charge. But going back to Jokanovic, I think it's a brilliant appointment. he plays nice football, very similar football to Chris Wilder, actually. So I don't think there's too much of a drastic change in terms of style of play. And when you're talking about managers who have got fantastic records at championship level, Slavisa Jokanovic is right up there. I think this decade or the past 10 years, what have you, he has only 4 managers have got better points per match record than him. And I think the only reason that's been let down is because of that first year, as you mentioned, at Fulham. In his first season at Watford, he got promoted. In the 2 out of 3 seasons he was at Fulham, they finished in the top 6. So that is quite a track record to have at championship level, and there aren't many better at this level than him. So I think it's a fantastic appointment by Sheffield United. Hopefully it settles them down as a club, because at the moment things seem a bit behind the scenes. But now that they have got him in charge and they've got that permanent man, hopefully he can take him to the Premier League. As I say, it's a very good championship squad. So yeah, hopefully Slavisa can guide them on their way back to the Prem. Moving on to other management news, it's widely reported that Chris Wilder, who we were just talking about, is about to become the next West Brom boss after Sam Allardyce left. You're a fan of that one, Justin?
Yeah, I love that one. I love Chris Wilder. I think he's fantastic, and I think as well as that, I'm surprised that no top 15, top 10 club have come in for him. I think the reason why I say that, I know some people might go, really, but he's improved every single club he's worked at. I think when he got promoted from League Two with Northampton, they were under transfer embargo for 6 months. They couldn't bring anyone in. He's improved every single club he's worked at, and I'm surprised he's not had a top job yet. I don't know if he needed more of a break, because this season it looked like it really took it out of him, because he's such a sparky character. He was he looked a bit more downtrodden this season. Granted, they did play very, very poorly, especially going forwards, but the wealth of attacking options in this West Brom team, God, this is going to be an interesting season. Yeah, if he's in charge.
If he's in charge, it looks almost certain that that's going to be the case, but it's quite a mix having Chris Wilder and this West Brom squad in the Championship. Chris Wilder, as you rightly say, I think he's got some sort of a record where before last season, he'd only finished below the season before once, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
In the English pyramid. He's got an unbelievable record. He has improved every club that he's been at, and everyone, has focused too much on how badly last season went at Sheffield United. Before that, there weren't too many better English managers than him around. He is a brilliant manager at this level, and for West Brom to get him in, I think it could be one hell of a move. And hopefully this takes him on to the next level. Transfer news, Justin. Reading defender Omar Richards has finally signed for Bayern Munich. We know it's happening for quite some time, but has now eventually been confirmed. Luton have signed Fred Onyedinma from Wickham on a permanent deal. You were quite a fan of that, weren't you?
Yeah, it was. I'm interested to see where he plays for Luton, because whether they play that diamond formation, I think there was. Nathan Jones was trying out different things towards the end of last season. But if he plays in that diamond, I think he could play as a 2 up front. Could potentially play wing back if they were if they were to go 3 at the back. So yeah, I think it's a really good signing for Luton, and he's a good player on Onyedinma. Don't be fooled by the bad goal record. He creates a lot of chances in his runs. He's a really good player.
Millwall are signing left-back Scott Malone on a permanent deal from Derby. They're also getting Hull goalkeeper George Long. The latest clubs to announce their released players include West Brom, Bournemouth and Middlesbrough. West Brom have let go Charlie Austin, Hal Robson-Kanu, Kamil Grosicki, Lee Peltier, Branislav Ivanovic and Carl Edwards. Some extremely good championship players in there, Justin. Of course, we're expecting Charlie Austin to go back to QPR. Kamil Grosicki, a fantastic championship player, and how Robson-Kanu was fantastic for West Brom in the season they went up. People forget about that, don't they?
They do. I think Kyle Edwards is worth pointing out as well. He's a player who has got a lot of potential still. Very good with the ball at his feet. So there's some good players in that group. I think if I was a club looking at a top six, trying to improve my bench, for example, there are some players I'd pick up there. Swansea.
Kamil Grosicki would be a fantastic signing for any championship side. Bournemouth have released Jack Wilshere. I've got a friend who isn't a particularly keen follower of the championship, and he said to me in the week that he didn't realise Jack Wilshere had been at Bournemouth, which is perhaps a good summary of this season for him. Because I think it's been a successful one in the way that he hasn't been injured, which is not something we've been able to say for Jack Wilshere for much of his career. But any hope of him getting back to his best is long gone, isn't it?
We've barely spoken about him, which is probably indicative of how he's played in this Bournemouth team. I don't think they particularly played a system under Woodgate that suited him, so he's not really been in the team too much. But a player like Jack Wilshere of his guild 5 or 6 years ago coming into Championship, you'd be like, whoa, mind blown. But actually, it's unsurprising at all. I don't know where he's going to go from here. It is sad because he's a quality player, but these things happen with injuries.
Yeah, I think he'll definitely be picked up by probably another championship side, but it'll be interesting to know what wages he's on, because I can't imagine it's much, because clubs are very much aware of his injury record. Middlesbrough are letting go of some big names, Britta Sombalonga and Ashley Fletcher, which we already knew was going to happen. Marvin Johnson, Jordan Archer and Nathaniel Mendez-Lang have also gone. Former Spain international Mikel San Jose has also left Birmingham, despite having an extra year left on his deal. That was a weird move, wasn't it? Because initially, when he went to Birmingham, his first couple of games, he was fantastic. And then since then, he's looked very, very average. But there you go. Luton have released George Moncur, Kazenga Lualua and Brendan Galloway. Final bit of transfer news. Barnsley, Huddersfield and Wednesday are all reportedly trying to sign the tallest outfield professional player in Britain. Solihull Moor striker Kyle Hudlin is 6'9". And I tell you what, I do feel sorry for players like that, Justin, because he probably grew up and looked at someone like Messi and thought, I want to be like him. But as soon as a coach sees him, it's either straight in at centre back or as a big target man. You don't really get a say, do you?
I can just hear Tony Pulis salivating at the thought of him.
Oh yeah. Well, I imagine there's quite a few championship managers who will maybe be looking at him. Away from transfers, Stoke have released their accounts. They've made a loss of £91 million, which is an awful lot of money, isn't it? Especially when it leads to them finishing 14th in the Championship. While we're on clubs spending an awful lot of money, Justin, has Derby's takeover been complete yet?
Nope.
The provisional England squad for the Euros has been revealed. 23 of the 33-man squad have played in the EFL. It's always nice to see some Football League representation in there, isn't it? Just a good reminder as well that players we're watching in the Championship right now could very well be representing their countries in the near future. It's not as much of a stretch as it once was, Justin. Championship legend Chris Brunt has announced his retirement. What a man, Justin. What a man. What a left foot.
Yeah, it's an underrated left foot, I think. It was a very good player. I think it was at Wednesday, wasn't he? He was at Sheffield Wednesday, and then West Brom. For some reason, I get him and Glenn Whelan mixed up all the time, but which is a very good tribute right now. But yeah, he was such a good player in his days at West Brom, especially at Championship level. And yes, it's sad, but it's part of the process. These players retire, we get new ones, we get to worship new ones, and they'll come along.
Yeah, well, in terms of Championship legends, he's one who's played an awful long time in the Premier League, and I think is a really underrated Premier League player because he has been able to play at that level for so long and been a key player for West Brom for so long. So good luck, Chris Brunt, with your future plans, whatever they may be. James Vaughan has announced his retirement from football at the age of 32. Can you guess how many appearances he's made in the Championship? And don't try and be clever here by double guessing it. Give me a genuine guess at what you think it would have been.
I'm going to say 60.
183 times.
What?
Exactly what I thought, Justin. I have no idea he's played that much, but I had to Google who he's actually played for in the Championship because I barely remember him playing. He's played for 7 clubs. Can you name 2 of them, apart from Derby?
Norwich and Birmingham. I actually wicked him when he announced his retirement because I wanted to see how many goals he scored this season.
Well, you say Norwich and Birmingham. He hasn't played for Norwich in the Championship.
Oh, right, fair enough. There you go.
The clubs he's played for, include Derby, Leicester, Crystal Palace, Huddersfield, Birmingham, Sunderland, and Wigan. All of them at Championship level. Cannot remember him playing for any of them.
I remember Sunderland because it was Simon Grayson who signed him.
Yes.
And he scored twice and then went to Wigan. Went to Wigan after that.
Yes, he was at Bury, wasn't he? And had a very good season there, and quite a few Championship clubs were looking at him, and then he went to Sunderland and did terrible, which is very Sunderland-esque. Final bit of news, Justin, completely bizarre news. Blackburn forward Ben Brereton has been called up to the Chile national team. He was born in Stoke. As far as I'm aware, he has never been to Chile, but his mum is from there. So there you go. Well done to Ben Brereton. Justin, it's time for the polls. This is the part of the show where I ask the listeners on Twitter 3 questions that we want to get their input in. So the first question that I put out to the listener, Justin, was this. Who will finish highest in the Premier League next season? Brentford, Norwich, or Watford?
I think Norwich will finish highest.
I'd have said Brentford. The listener has gone Watford. 43% said Watford. 30% said Brentford. Only 20% said Norwich. So not too many people fancying Norwich so far. Where will Swansea finish in the Championship next season? Automatics, playoffs, top half, or lower than that?
At the moment, I'd say top half.
I'd also say top half. The listener also says top half. 51% said top half. 27% said playoffs. 18% said lower. Only 4% said automatics. And finally, does a straw have 1 hole or 2?
I think it has 1 hole.
It's 2. Come on now, let's not be silly. I didn't actually give the answer then, did I? I just put my phone down. Hang on a sec. 55% said 1. 45% said 2. That makes no sense. It's 2. Right, now it's time for this. Yes, it's time for Simon Grayson's Hateful 8. This is the part of the show where usually we give Justin and 2 guests a question which they have to name 8 of. So, for example, if I would say name the first 8 teams in the Championship alphabetically, we'd go around, and if they get one wrong, they're out, and we keep going until they name all 8. But to mark the end of this glorious Championship season, we thought we'd do things a bit differently this week. I'm going to answer the question. Simon Grayson has turned the tables on me. That sneaky so-and-so. Justin, what is the question this week?
Yeah, we've got ourselves a reverse Hateful 8 here. So obviously we saw Steve Cooper, a defeated boss in the playoff final, but can you name me the last 8 Championship playoff final losers?
The losers or the managers?
Managers.
Oh, bloody hell,
they are
tough.
big losers in this situation. In all fairness, I just got the teams in front of me and I was able to just pick the names off. I knew who they were.
I think I'd struggle to name the teams. Right, okay. Managers. Are we counted Steve Cooper? No. Okay. Thomas Frank.
Yes.
Steve Bruce.
Yes. Yeah, 2018, Steve Bruce Villa lost that one.
Who was in between? Oh, Frank Lampard.
Yeah, didn't play a striker in the playoff final. Well done, Frank. Hope you get another top job.
So bitter. Right. Who was before Villa? Was that Reading? Well, Yapstam's there, isn't he?
Yep, Yapstam. That's the one. That playoff final 0-0 against Huddersfield, which Huddersfield won.
Now you're asking. That's 4 down into. I've got 4 left.
You've gone 2020 to 2017 there, so you've gone in order from the top.
So 2016, I think, was Wednesday, wasn't it? And that was Carlos Carvajal.
Yeah, Big C. I think he won a cup with Braga last couple of weeks. Doing very well down there.
Well done, Carlos. Oh, Christ, it was before that.
We've mentioned this one already today.
Have we really? Yes. Norwich beat Middlesbrough, didn't they? And Middlesbrough manager was Karanka?
It was Karanka, 2-0 to Norwich in that final.
I'm doing a lot better than I was expecting. I'm having a Barnsley. Right, okay.
You're doing really well. You're getting through it a lot quicker than I got through last week's.
2014 was Derby, and the manager was Steve McLaren.
It was Steve McLaren.
So the last one I've got is 2013.
2013.
And I can't remember who won in 2013.
It was a forgettable final. It was a goal in extra time that won it. A penalty in extra time that won it.
Yes, that was Palace against Watford. But I can't remember who the Watford manager was.
Who was the manager?
Oh, dear.
Here's Hog Dini. Who was
I've got it.
manager?
I've got it. I nearly said Jokanovic. I nearly stumbled then. But because you said that,
Oh, no.
I remembered. I would have not remembered because the camera pans instantly to Gianfranco Zola.
Yep, it is Gianfranco.
Thank you for saying that because I would have never got that had you not said that. Oh, Christ. I got very nervous then, but I managed to pull it out of the bag. I'm very proud of myself for that. I think that's a good effort.
It's stressful, isn't it?
It is stressful. But it helps when the person asking the questions gives you clues.
Yeah, I cocked up there. Well done, me. Done a very good job.
Well done, you, and well done, me. Well, there we go. That brings an end to a glorious season of Championship football. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining us, not just today, but throughout the season. Despite the football ending, we are still providing the goods over these summer months. That's right, although it won't be our usual episodes. Here's a vague plan of what we're doing. Next week, we'll be doing our season grades, where we go through each team in the Championship, talk about what went well, what went wrong, before giving them a grade. That's more than likely to be a two-parter, and that'll come out next weekend. So you've got that to look forward to. We'll probably do one more episode after that, and then we have a series of meets episodes lined up for you with current players in the Championship right now and a few Championship legends as well. Very in-depth chats there. So you have that to look forward to. Me and Justin are going to use that time to have a well-deserved break. Justin, how are you going to spend your summer?
Fixing my house.
I'm going to spend 2 months in the pub. As always, guys, thank you for your support. If you could just take 2 seconds of your time to leave us a review on Apple Podcasts, then we'd be really grateful for that. It goes a long way to helping us grow as a show. Congratulations to Brentford. We're going to miss talking about you, and commiserations to Swansea fans. We look forward to seeing you again next season. As for us, we'll be back again on Saturday for part 1 of our team grading episode. We look forward to seeing you then. This has been the Second Tier Podcast. I've been Ryan Dilks.
I've been Justin Peach.
Thank you for listening.